Hello, and welcome back to the Obsidian Mirror. I hope that you have had something happen to you today or this evening that brought you some genuine joy. And hopefully something about this video found you for a reason. I'm not sure what that is at the moment, but here on the Obsidian Mirror, we pause a moment to reflect. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few deep breaths with me, starting now. Thank you for joining me if you did, and if not, maybe next time. So today I want to do a mirror reflection read so that we can get a closer look at the internal landscape and active patterns. While I shuffle the cards, it may be a good time for you to grab a beverage of choice. Perhaps continue breathing intentionally in the style that you prefer. It may be a good time to connect with your body in whatever way that feels safe right now. Maybe some jumping jacks, maybe some gentle stretching. From the Wild Unknown Tarot, we're going to pull a card that represents the current state. And I just wanted to say that recently I was discussing breathing techniques with someone else, and we came to the conclusion that 4-6 breathing or 4-7-6 breathing could be seen as the accessible version and the advanced version of the same technique. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is a technique where you inhale for 4 beats, or 4 seconds, or 4 heartbeats, and then exhale to the count of 6. We agreed that that was the accessible version. Now, for the advanced version, that would be inhaling for 4, holding for 7, and exhaling for 6. And in my experience, it takes a little bit of practice to get to the accessible version in a way that feels comfortable and less effortful, not necessarily effortless, but not as hard to do. So I've been able to accomplish that, which I count as a win, and I am moving on to practicing with the 4-7-6 method of the same technique, or the advanced version. I'm wondering if any of you have experience with this breathing technique, which one you prefer, and if there's anything in particular it helps you with more than others. A particular type of activation, perhaps a specific emotional experience. And I invite you to drop it into the comments so that I can learn more about you, and so that our community here, which is small but growing on the Obsidian Mirror, can learn as well if they want to. It could be one way for us to connect and relate to each other, which I find quite exciting. But we have the active pattern here with the archetype card. And I'm going to get the shadow that could possibly be experienced at this point, otherwise known as the unseen or avoided. Now, if anything about these videos, or this video in particular, I was gonna say resonates with you, but even if you just like it and you want to share it or what have you, I invite you to like, comment, or subscribe. Feel free to share these videos as well. I am aware that my style is not for everyone, and that's okay. This channel is meant to be a safe space that people can settle into and work with symbol systems in my way. I'm sure there are other people who do it my way, so I'm not going to try and claim ownership, but it is slow and it is introspective, and that is not for everyone. Also, if you like, comment, or subscribe, it will help me understand what you like or don't like a little bit better. And will help me refine my process. I'm going to reach for the tarot again for a point of possible integration. I think I'm getting a good sense of this reading so far, but the fourth card will help me get some more detail, of course. Okay. Now I'm drinking coconut water today, and it's real warm outside, so I'm going to have a couple of sips. If you have a beverage with you, I encourage you to do the same. And for those of you who don't like swallowing noises, I am a human. And humans who swallow liquids make noises, so sorry, not sorry, as it were. I'm going to check the film setup and make sure that everything is aligned okay. because I am still refining my process. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Now, before I proceed, I'm going to take another deep breath, and I encourage you to do the same if it feels safe to do so. Okay, so for the current state, we see the Hermit, which is represented by a tortoise, I believe, a tortoise or a turtle with a gas lamp on top of its shell. It is in a dark environment, which is made darker by the tortoise or turtle being pulled into its shell. Now, the Hermit, much like this channel, likes to turn within, likes to review the past, likes to go over the experiences that have been had to see what could be learned there. I am a believer that you can learn from just about anything if you try hard enough. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but it can be done. So I get the sense that some of us may be in a time of deep reflection, less socialization than perhaps other times of our lives. And this can be a cyclical experience. So for some, they prefer to be extroverted all the time. For others, they prefer to be introverted all the time. But I think that there are a fair amount of us who can relate to the idea of it being a little bit of a pendulous experience where we go from one mode to the other. And sometimes this can be externally guided. Things that may be not so fun happen to us, and so we retreat into our shell a little bit. And sometimes it is an intuitive process where something inside of us calls us to slow down a little bit and take a little bit closer of a look at how our internal world may or may not have shifted. What we could have learned from recent experiences, and perhaps with even a sense of protectiveness over either our life or our internal process. It can be pretty hard to share some of these introspective moments with others. And I'm not going to assign a moral judgment to that, saying that sharing should or should not be happening, or that keeping one's internal world to themselves is either right or wrong. I would like to step outside of the moral framework and just observe things as they could be. In any case, we're going to move on to card number 2. The active pattern that could be experienced right now. And the archetype card that we have is the Mask. For those of you watching the video, we can see a card split right down the middle. One that has a lot of watercolor and the other one that is just black and white and gray. The colored side has half a mask, and the monotone side has 0 facial features that I can discern. And so what is more obvious is that there could be a felt level of maintaining performance. Now, this could be performance for the self, or for others, or a mix. Perhaps there is a sense of not wanting to get out of bed in the morning, but we know that we have a life to maintain, and so we get up and we may or may not make our bed, but we definitely make sure to put on our mask before we leave the house. And that mask could be thick or thin. It could be jovial or happy, or something else entirely. I think that it's worth mentioning, sometimes we can relate a lot to the masks that we wear, and we can form a bond with it because it serves us, because it protects us, and it can influence our sense of identity. For some of us, it's almost impossible to discern where the mask ends and where we begin. For some of us, it is much, much more obvious. So I think that in this reading, it is worth contemplating the idea of the many-layered self and how we present in the world. And if we are able to take the mask off at all, anywhere, at any time, perhaps there are 1 or 2 very close friends that we can be 110% ourselves with. And when I say 110%, I mean that in a sense of growth and becoming and freedom to do so. Maybe we have 1 mask for every person in our life. Maybe we can only shed these protective layers when we are completely alone. Or perhaps there is a mask that we wear when we are completely alone, so that we can feel comfortable in solitude instead of empty in loneliness. And I do not begrudge any manifestation of how you could be experiencing this. I am well versed in the many facets of self, at least in terms of my own growth and development. So I know that it can be quite challenging. And so I am sending my love, whether you are willing to receive that or not, then receive it or not. I am just doing my best to be as supporting and encouraging as I can as a faceless YouTube channel. In any case, we're going to move on to the 3rd card, which is the Three of Wands in reverse, also known as quid pro quo in the Shadow Seer Tarot, excuse me. And so this represents the unseen or avoided aspect of self. I think that in terms of this spread, there is an expectation that may be one-sided. Now, the reason why I say that is because for some of us, we live in a highly transactional culture. Perhaps we were raised that way. Perhaps it is an aspect of whatever economic system you live under at the time. Maybe it is an attempt to understand a potential equal exchange of value in a way that you're not quite familiar with yet. And so I see some attempt at reconciling this idea of either giving or receiving in a way that is fair, not over-giving, not taking too much. And I think that is a valuable way to approach relationships of many kinds and mutual exchange. I also think that it keeps one stuck in the transaction rut. Sometimes there is no fair exchange. Sometimes we are able to volunteer our time in ways that others cannot currently give back. And so we are giving of ourselves with zero expectation of return. I think that some of us have donated tangible resources in the past without any expectation of return. And I also want to bring to mind the idea of doing good deeds because you know that someday they will be returned to you, which is another level of expectation. That idea that what goes around comes around. And I think that personally, my view of that is that it dilutes the original intention. If you donate the clothes that you don't wear anymore because you expect some windfall, some unexpected windfall in the future, that kind of takes the donation out of it, takes the Good Samaritan out of it. I'm not sure if I'm communicating this properly. It reminds me of Christians racking up a list of good deeds to pay their way into heaven, which I think is ultimately an odd way to look at it. There's a lot to unpack there, but I'll just move on to the Father of Swords, also known as the King of Swords. And as far as integration or guidance goes, for this spread, it gives me a sense of decisiveness. I always get a sense of decisiveness with swords, and discernment, and the ability to act quickly, perhaps not as quickly as a Wands card, but still pretty mobile. I think that this entire spread could be speaking to analysis paralysis or perfectionism, perhaps slowing progress, where getting out of the arena of the mind and into the lived experiment, the action, the learning by doing, could be happening. There's a lot to be said for rest, reflection, and review. There's also a lot to be said about textbook learning and having a good sense of theories. But none of those things amount to any kind of practice. And practice is where the real lessons come in. So I think that if the owl on the Father of Swords card were to speak now as the advice giver in the advice giver position in the spread, I think the Father of Swords would be ignore the money, ignore who gives and who takes, because this is the point in the game where we are experiencing and gathering data through experience. I think that the Father of Swords would say that there is a time and a place for the Hermit, and not to ignore the review process, but also not to get stuck in it. And I think that the Father of Swords would understand and remind us that masks can be useful and or necessary, and that we don't necessarily want to throw away our masks, but perhaps we want to be more conscious in how we use them. I invite you to take another deep breath with me. And if anything in this reading stuck out to you or made some kind of impression, feel free to let me know by interacting with this video on some level. If not, that's okay. I would like to remind you to take a few sips of your drink, which I am also going to do. Whoops, I was a human on camera again. My bad. I'm just kidding. In any case, I hope that this was at least entertaining for you in some way. And maybe I'll see you again on the Obsidian Mirror.